Welcome, I'm Peter Shergold from the Centre for Social Impact, and this is Yakety Yak, the very first Yakety Yak we're doing from Adelaide, with the support and hosting of PwC, and I thank them for that. When I was a small kid being brought up in rural Cornwall, my mum, who was a Londoner, would sometimes tell me about the Second World War, particularly the Blitz, but also the exciting bits. And one of the things that always stood out to me was her visits to speedway, motorbikes and speed cars. I think she would be really pleased to be here this evening and would see our guest this evening as a real hero. His name is Phillip Herreen, and he made his mark as a speed car driver until he had a very significant injury. That accident changed his life, but as we shall see, it's also changed the life of many others. As always, our interlocutor is going to be Peter Thompson, and I'm now going to ask Peter and Phillip to come and tell us this story.
Step forward.
As they say, roll those wheels.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were going to show that.
Where do we start? Let's go back to that moment, being made Senior Australian of the Year. A great honour. How were you able to actually use it in the year that followed, in particular, to get leverage in what you wanted to do?
Well, I think that was the thing that I didn't understand at the time, that it opened doors for me, particularly across Australia. I got to travel under the Australia Day banner sort of thing, and build a great relationship with John Howard, actually. I mean, it was very strange that that him and I hit it off right away, and he ever said, "Have you ever needed anything? You know, I'm only a phone call away." Yeah.
Peter Shergold will fix it up.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, and for the next 2 years, as an ambassador to the Australia Day Council, travelled widely, saying to people most things are possible, but you can't do it on your own. I mean, it's and I learnt that very, very soon. I've always been a very independent person, and love my independence, but this can make you aware that you can't do everything on your own. And even now, my children put the chocolates on the top shelf. I didn't realise I was the first person in a wheelchair that had ever been awarded a national award. A lot of people have been nominated, you know, and I thought, why did they pick me? And I think they just mentioned there Dr. Ruth Marshall, who was the director out there. She gave me an opportunity to work with these people. I mean, I went back to the Hampstead Centre after being discharged a few months prior to I should have.
Can I come back to these issues of the more recent years in a moment? But it strikes me, in reading about your story, that what has given you a unique position has been you were very resourceful before this accident, and the accident didn't change your personality. You've been very resourceful since the accident, and that's enabled you to actually help others in a way that other people have not been quite able to do so.
Yeah, look, I think having a title definitely helped, and I think if I needed some backing, the Australia Day Council were there to do so. I mean, if I needed a letter from somebody, and I brought along two people that were very much into my life before the accident, particularly Ian, but and afterwards. But the Paraquad Association, it opened the doors to so many opportunities, and to get sponsorship on board, for services. I mean, people with disabilities were struggling. I couldn't go home because my house was at Pasadena was in the foothills, and they told my wife, you better look for look around, you know, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I was lucky. I had people that said, well, we'll make the place wheelchair friendly for you, sort of thing. You know, I mean, there's no government support.
Can we talk for a moment about that moment that changed your life, which we saw so graphically? How you survived that is a miracle to start with. What do you remember of that?
Oh, look, I remember it pretty much. I mean, you know, when it happened. I mean, I've got highlights on my race car, and I've crashed a lot. But well, a lot. You know,
you always used to crash, did you?
My team used to say either crashes or wins, you know, but luckily I won more than I crashed. But I never had a crash as horrific as that. I walked away. You know, the cars were very well, you know, built and the like and that there. If you go back to Rolly Park, when we just raced in a pair of white overalls and desert boots and a silk scarf around our face, it was cars caught fire and you jumped out and you rolled yourself in the dirt, sort of thing, you know. You know, I mean, it wasn't as done.
What made you so good at this? I know this is actually a product of 30 years of racing. But what made you so good to be able to become national champion? Because this was a very, very highly competitive, highly contested event.
Yeah. You should ask my wife that question. I said, I'm not retiring until I can win this bloody national title once, sort of thing, and it took me 30 years. And that's ironic as well, because I'd run second on many, many occasions, and it frustrated me. But part of that deal was we got invited in 1990, the Commonwealth Games were in Auckland, and the Australian Speedway Association got invited to take a troop to Auckland as part of the Fringe. And they brought an American team in as well, and we ran over there for a month as part of a Fringe at the Auckland Western Springs Speedway. During the day, they were playing cricket, and you weren't allowed to go on the green turf. You know, so you were fined heavily if you went onto the grass, sort of thing. That there, so
cut up the wicket a bit.
Oh well, I mean, you were just about sort of pulled out of the race and put your car on the trailer if you went on the grass. So it changed driving attitudes quite a bit.
You took this speedway stuff up when you were 17 years of age, when you went to visit a garage in Adelaide, and they signed you up on the spot. And within a year, you were driving race cars.
Yeah, well, I didn't realise until a few weeks later why I got offered to drive. I had two elder sisters they wanted me to introduce them to.
Yes. That was part of the deal.
That was part of the deal, yeah.
So I sign you up, and your dad was horrified by this idea.
My dad,
not only about your
my dad
your
didn't
sisters.
know I raced. I mean, it was that
he didn't know.
No,
he didn't know you raced.
No. My dad said Rolly Park, as it was in those days, was attended by bodgies and widgies on motorbikes. They were.
That was true, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I mean, it was built around, you know, around speed cars and motorcycles. And as you mentioned, England, they bought test teams. Kim Benithan is a great friend of mine now. See him regularly. Poor dear, he's struggling with health now himself. He's turning 90. But yeah, these guys sort of had a car that they were going to hand down to somebody. And they said, well, you can drive it. My other mate worked next door in a crash repair shop. And so his brother helped on their crew, and I was helping this chap called Ray Skipper, who was a champion driver at this time here. When I was working there, our company was down the road. I was working there Saturday mornings to pull petrol just to get a few extra dollars because I was an apprentice cadetship in engineering.
What were your dad and mum like to give them fears about what you were just about to start?
My mum was happy. My mum was always happy to encourage Roma, you're right. Yes, Roma Ellen. She was always happy to encourage what we did. And I mean, we lived in St. Peter's and we were in the switchbacks behind the zoo here in Adelaide on push bikes and come home covered in mud, you know. But I mean, as long as you were cleaned up and at the table by 6 and opened the gates for my father, when he came home, everything was cool.
And your dad had been to the war?
He's been to the war, yeah. I mean, he was one of 7 or 8. You know, he was the third son in 7 or 8 people. Grew up on the west coast and come to Adelaide because there wasn't enough, you know, work on the land, and was driving fuel and water tanks from Kimber up to the opal fields.
When you think back on it, I know you feel like maybe all our mothers leave us with things we remember they said, but there are particular things that your mother said which were very value oriented in terms of what matters in life.
Look, I mean, I got to know more about my mother when I had my accident, about her.
Because you actually wrote up the family history, didn't you?
I did.
What an interesting thing to do.
Sorry?
That's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, you're in hospital for 4 months, can't do a lot. And my mother used to come in at least 4 or 5 days a week. And on the bus and the tram to North Terrace, we were living at St. Peter's, and knit. And always for the grandchildren, if you like, and whoever. And our door was always open to whoever was in trouble around the neighbourhood. I mean, kids did get in trouble, and we'd often have an extra person sitting at our table for tea.
There were 6 of you anyhow, 6 kids.
Oh yeah, but often there was 8. I was the oldest son, so I had to make sure the lower siblings, that the 2 girls were looked after themselves, but I had 2 younger brothers. Can be terrors at times, sort of stuff. So I had to be the person to show the way. I mean, if I did something stupid, they'd follow you, sort of thing, that there. So we made tandem bikes, and I always rode from the front. They were on the back, that there. Then we changed. When they got older, they pushed harder, and I sat in the back. But I mean, it was. But my mother always saw the good in everybody. She had a wonderful way of life. She always encouraged people to have a go.
She said something like, "Give back, don't give up."
Oh yes, I mean, I had low days in hospital and the like, and that there, and she said one day in there, sometimes these things happen for a reason, and you'll find that reason as time goes by. And there was times that I thought I would be better off. I had a good insurance, so the wife and family would have been better off without me being there. I knew I had an insurance policy, but I'd been signing every year that by motor racing, water skiing, snow skiing and light aircraft were exempted from being able to collect on this insurance.
You can understand why.
Yeah. So, and I used to do all those sort of things at some stage or other.
Actually, it was on a skiing trip you met Colleen.
It was. Later on, yes, it was. Second wife, though. I didn't mention my first wife in the first script that I did for Sarah. She said, "You've got a child there that's older than your, well, as old as your wife, nearly, sort of thing. What's going on there?"
You're allowed to forget those things.
So I didn't, sort of. But my first marriage broke down because I was too into work. I mean, we were building stuff in the southeast. And
so your life in those, you got married quite young.
Yeah, 25.
And in those days, had the 2 kids, you were sort of in the speedway business and also in the construction business, and actually were involved in building this structure. Yeah,
that was a bit later now than that there, but when you go back to the 60s, mainly in those days we were building schools and country schools and the like, and we got into building the mobile oil refinery. Big job with Balderstone, big company here in Adelaide. That was our big construction job, but we also built stuff in Portland, Victoria, and I was going down there on a Sunday night and working until Friday, and leaving Friday morning, getting back here and racing, playing football on Saturday, and heading back Sunday to the Riverland, sort of thing. So,
as you lie in hospital after this accident, you're waiting for transfer to Hampstead to the rehab centre, and Anzac Day. You're supposed to actually be moved to Hampstead, but
it's
Anzac Day comes along.
Yeah, it was interesting. The Friday they came to me and sort of said that we're going to move you out to Hampstead, or Thursday or Friday, it wasn't there. And Anzac Day happened to fall on the Saturday or the Monday. I'm not quite sure now, but maybe it was the Monday. And there was a nurses' strike, for something or other. So they come and said to me, "We're not going to move you now until Tuesday," and I found out later, when I worked at Hampstead, they didn't like taking people on a Friday because they had limited staff on the weekends to take new staff that were high dependent, and I was very high dependent. So it was postponed till Tuesday. I watched the first Anzac Day match march that I had watched in probably 10, 15, 20 years.
And you saw it with different eyes.
I did. I saw people there in wheelchairs and limbless and on crutches and being pushed, and it sort of said to me, these guys had given up a lot to make this place what it is, and no one caused this accident but me.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and the like. But I didn't see I had a useful purpose. I was out in I like to be on the site, construction, building things, and working with a team. I was always a team member or head of a team,
So when you say these things, it doesn't really come as a surprise that you started to feel like you needed to do something practical to help others when you were at Hampstead.
Yeah, well, like I said, I left early. My wife's birthday was on the 15th of August, and I went home on Friday the 13th to make sure I was there for her birthday, which I'd organised for a lot of friends to at least have because she'd had 3 or 4 months of hell, yeah. 2 young children and 2 other teenagers, and the kids were at school and college, and bills weren't being paid. Yeah, it was tough. We had to cash in a bit of stuff and sell off a car.
So just give us a picture of. I mean, you're doing it, but what was the deal in terms of what help was available for you?
Well,
once you were sort of unable to meet these things from your own resources.
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing. I mean, when you're in hospital recovering, sort of thing, I had multiple injuries, and I lost the sight out of my left eye. Broken ribs, fractured anus, which we didn't know about for a month or so afterwards. Torn shoulder. So I was being kept in the dark for a couple of months about what was happening. Bills coming in.
So if you get home, and I suppose it was an if for a while, you're likely to have no income.
Yeah.
Your wife Colleen wasn't working.
No, she
got
had
2 new kids.
Yep.
You need to modify your house.
Yep.
This is just on top of everything else. You need to sort of sort through these issues.
Well, I mean, initially they'd sort of said after visiting the house, when I first got to Hampstead on the Tuesday, within a few weeks they took me in a wheelchair and one of these access cab things and took me home and sort of said I had 2 flights of stairs at the back and steps at the front, and this place is not really wheelchair friendly. Not the ideal place to be.
Which place is?
Down the flat somewhere, but So my wife, she'd been told this, but they didn't tell me, and they'd told her just to start looking around to see, with my family, my sisters and brothers come on board, so they started looking down, in the Warradale area, Somerton, somewhere flat, and someone told me. Well, actually, they rang me at the hospital to say we've got a place for you to look at. And I thought, what place to look at? Is this a halfway house? No, we've got a place for you to look at. So
you obviously, I mean, you and Colleen made up your minds pretty quickly that you didn't want to add to the trauma by moving house as well.
Oh yeah, well, that's as I said, this took about a month before I came home. But, this took place about another house sort of thing.
Just the basic reality was that the cost of changing your house would have been about $25,000 if you,
$25,000,
if
back
you'd
then.
gone into you'd sort of used market prices. The government was going to make available $8,000.
Yep.
So that's a gap of $16,000 or more. But of course you were connected because you had mates in the building industry because that was your industry. So you were in a especially privileged circumstance, really.
Yeah, I mean, and they did come to the fore. I mean, the $8,000 that the government was going to supply was just about going to cover demolition and basic sort of thing. And what I didn't want was a white bathroom with stainless steel fittings. I'd been in those for 3 months in hospital stuff, and that was going to freak me out. I said, I want something warm. We were in hospitals at Hampstead, which was the old Morris 4, which was the old infectious diseases place. The bathroom, all the louvers were gone. You sat there in a wind tunnel, and I mean, it was like a car wash. They sort of soaped you down and hosed you off, and then threw you a couple of towels and pushed you up a ramp back into the ward, sort of stuff. So I sort of said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly. And I was president prior to my crash of the Precast Association of South Australia, sort of thing. So these guys come, what can we do for you? And I said, well, I don't want this. We'll make your vanity.
Well, other than helping, being able to get help from your siblings, from your family, from your friends, let's leave aside your own personal circumstances and think about what you were seeing other people facing.
Yeah.
I mean, psychologically, for a start, you quite quickly started to actually join in what became the mentoring program.
Well, I mean, I know it's times in essence. I mean, what really shook me into shape was that when I got to Hampstead, I was in a 4-bed area which had curtains only dividing us, and 2 of those people were quads who couldn't do anything for themselves. And I quickly realised that I was so fortunate that I didn't break my neck. I'd wore a special collar protector and helmet that saved me from breaking my neck. It shook me to back into reality.
So what did you start to do for other people? What were you able to do?
I wanted to drive. I wanted to have my independence to be able to drive. So the wheelchairs that they had then were quite bulky and cumbersome and very big. And my race car mates sort of said, we're going to chop one down and make it smaller.
Make it a racing version.
Yes. In racing, it's about lightness and not having all the junk on it, the bolts and all the bits and pieces. So they chopped off all the bottom undercarriage, because to get a chair in the car, you need to be able to take the wheels off and put it alongside you if you're going to be independent. What was happening now was we had to take the wheels off and put the chair in a boot. Yeah. And you couldn't shut the boot because it was too bloody big and cumbersome. So they chopped the undercarriage off and basically built a chair which is very similar to this one here, whereby there's just a one rail situation, and I could then drag the chair over my belly, and put it on the passenger seat, sort of thing. And that was the start of sort of having wheelchairs that were a bit more. And I shouldn't say we thought of it, but the wheelchair sports people that were playing basketball and
rugby, which you had to go at too.
Which I had to go at. Well, I only went out there really to find out what they did about building these chairs. That was the start of it. But I ended up getting on the team.
In basketball, they're out of the chairs more than they're in the
chairs.
Well,
I was. Not them. I was. And just quickly, one night we played in a basketball team, and I'd been up the chair many times. I'd burnt my hand hitting the floor many times. I went up to get a drink at a canteen, and I put my hand out for the change, and the woman there said, "What have you done to your hands? They're red raw." She said, "I've got skin repair. Put that on it, it will stop them burning." When I went outside the door to go to the car park, it was raining. It was August. And when I grabbed hold of these are the only brakes we got the hands on these wheels. We went into the rain, and I just skidded across the car park and ended up in the Rose Garden. And this was 10 o'clock Sunday night. Everyone else had gone. I fell out my chair in the Rose Garden. The chair rolled off down the car park in the dark. The 2 girls that were in the canteen came out with their torches, and I'm singing out to them, "Can you help me? I'm over here." And one of them said, "Don't go there, it's an old drunk. Just keep walking." So when they got further down close, and I said, "Are you the ladies that gave me the hand cream?" And she sort of put the torch out to me, and she said, "I've had a bit of an accident." Anyhow, as they walked over to me, a guy drove in the car park and saw the wheelchair in the middle of the 100 metres from where I was. He got out, pushed it aside, and drove up to where the girls were. He was a security man. And I'm sitting down on the gutter at the stage. Lucky the cushion had tipped out, so I'm on a cushion, still raining. And he got out the car, and so I'm big, security man. "What's happening here, ladies?" And I said to him, he said, "I'm not talking to you, I'll talk to you in a minute." So what's happening? What's this? What's this guy? What's he troubling you? Well, and I'm saying, "I've had a." Shut up. So that was the start of me understanding about being vulnerable. Finally, he went and got my chair for me, and we got back in a chair. Unfortunately, I didn't know the Rose Garden had just been topped in horse manure. So I had to ring my wife to tell her. Luckily, I still had a phone in my car, which was fixed in those days. Running a bit late, I've had a bit of an accident, and I'm a bit wet, and I'm covered in a bit of horse dung. She said, "Make sure you take your clothes up the front. Take your clothes off at the front door before you come in the house." So that was of being vulnerable. And
everyone feels vulnerable, don't they?
Oh, I think when you lose your wheelchair and you're in a car park at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday, it's a little bit, yes.
No, I mean everyone in a chair feels vulnerable.
Oh, yes. And that's what people fear. Yeah. People fear about, I fell out a lot in the first 12 or 18 months. I didn't damage myself a lot.
So what sort of psychological help were you able to give others? By doing what?
Well, it was really about having a go, and I'd show people that you can fall out, and I was young enough and fit enough that I could get out and get back in a chair. Sometimes you put the chair up against a gutter so you don't have to lift as high, and you get all those sorts of things. what I tried to do with public there was get mobile phones made more affordable for people that were, you know, in wheelchairs sort of things, and like they're under funds and that. But my thing was about getting people to get into a swimming pool to get better, you know, and the gym. I mean, and it wasn't just young people were more enticed to have a go. I was working with people of my age group and older. And these were Chinese and Japanese people that had come over here and gone to the Flinders, gone to Kangaroo Island, rolled a car over. We had a doctor who had his mother and father here from Japan, and China, went to Kangaroo Island. He rolled the car, and they both end up paras and quads, his family. And they were on a 10th-storey building in Beijing, no lifts.
Now, just to give some sense of the scale of your own commitment to this, you did this on a voluntary basis for 15 years, 3 days a week.
Look, I needed to do something. I mean, it was, like I said, the insurance I had didn't cover originally this racing, what they call it, risk-taking and high-risk opportunities. But it had been fought in a Sydney court by someone, and they'd won in 1990. And I'd never realised it, that I hadn't been signing off these sheets the last 2 years. But you had to be disabled permanently for 12 months. Before you could claim.
Paraquad SA, with whom you've worked
yep.
for the last 2 decades, virtually, has, of course, a whole list of things that need to be done. What have you've been able to do most?
Look, I mean,
what's been your shopping list?
Well, my shopping list was being that I couldn't go out to Hampstead as a volunteer, off the street. So, following my 18 months, 2 years with Wheelchair Sports, I got a member of their board. Once again, it was to get people opportunities and get them equipment so they could get into sport. Because that was the biggest thing about getting people to work with, you know, and associate with people of your same level. And so I resigned from the Wheelchair Sports Association after the 2000 Olympics, and then moved in with Paraquad. And our first event was a wheelchair Grand Prix in the east end of Adelaide, and we invited sporting people and Thunderbird's team, the basketball, the staff force, the police, the fire brigade. Each 4-member team had to raise $1,000 for the team to be entered in a wheelchair Grand Prix. And we did that to raise, and we had 10 teams raise $10,000. So we did 2 more of those before we got kicked off of the parade ground.
This is a big subject on which we could talk all night. But let's come to something which has happened quite recently, which is the Productivity Commission has come out with this major report on disability, in which they suggest that a national insurance scheme, and both major parties in politics are committed to it. Is that going to change things in a radical way?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because in hospital there were 2 types of patients: compensable and non-compensable. The haves, have not.
And that would depend on their circumstances of the accident.
Oh, absolutely. So if you were injured in a work-related accident, you were covered for everything. Build a new house. 2 wheelchairs, 3 wheelchairs, computers, whatever you needed to get you back in some way, whatever. If it was a third-party insurance claim, where you were a passenger in a car, and now I talk to people in this police role, you know, education I do, more than half the people, and I could ask the question here, don't realise that as a driver of a car, you're not covered by any insurance. It's only the passenger. So if you have an accident as a driver, you're on your own, unless you can find fault with someone else who's done it. But if you fall asleep and you crash your car, or you have an accident on a houseboat, or you're diving, or on a farm, or a push bike, unless you've got a salary continuance type thing, or an accident in policy, which they advertise on the telly all the way now, but back then, no. So a lot of young people, particularly, were in cars that crashed and weren't compensable. What really got under my skin was the people that stole motor cars and crashed them. The passengers that were in that car as a stolen car, unlicensed or whatever, were still covered. Not the same as, but they were covered to some degree. And they got a lot of services and wheelchairs, electric chairs, $10,000 chairs, and the person that was not had to fundraise.
Now, just to wind this up, it seems surprising that someone of your youth could be made Senior Australian of the Year.
Huh.
But that's a matter of record. You're attending to what you call your bucket list, which are things which are sort of more personal significance to you. And that's interesting.
Just go back to that sort of age situation out there. I was working with people a lot younger than I was, and I didn't want to be 60. So for the record out there, when anyone asked me how old I was always 59. And when I got awarded Senior Australian of the Year, you had to be 60 or over. And they went to referee. Well, yeah. Finally I had to send a bloody birth certificate. But what happened was they sent letters of referees to the director of the hospital and people out there that was my work case manager. Right? And no, he's only 59. I don't think he qualifies. And but hang on, he had an accident when he was in 92, 93, and that's anyhow.
Well, the lesson is, yes.
The lesson is, I forgot to add the GST. That's all it was. I was exempt. So
what's on your bucket list?
So my bucket list. Look, you're right. I mean, unfortunately, in the last 3 or 4 years leading up to when I was going to retire, a lot of the guys I grew up with, a lot of guys that helped me, one's in hospital now that did my bathroom over, had a heart attack 4 weeks ago, and he's still in a coma. He's 65. I went to 3 or 4 funerals of very close friends and business people who didn't make 70. And I decided, I think it was time that I spent a bit of, bucket list was visit some of my relatives, get back to the West Coast, just go and see people that helped me. The people I worked with a long time ago, they're retired and gone places and that there. I had a garden that was died due to our water restrictions and like that there, and I needed to make that wheelchair friendly. I'd fallen over it been in it too many times, and had ants crawling over me. So it was going to be elevated to a height that I could look after it, and 15 years had gone by, and maintenance on the house had fallen apart. I was always out doing things, and I'm still doing it with Paraquad. But I mean, the thing that's really made me very proud, to be associated with Paraquad is, we've built purpose-built homes here in Adelaide, and we just opened, is it 5, Michael? Yes. 5 in Mount Gambier.
Which particularly is attractive to people who've been neglected in the past.
We've had people in hospital for 2 years that can't go back to the southeast because they've got nowhere to live. So these are transitional homes they can stay into for 6 or 12 months sort of things like that, and they're purpose built. I'd move in one tomorrow where my wife would send me there, maybe she would. But I mean, but they're great. They're fantastic. And Paraquad's had to do this. The government don't do it. I mean, the Motor Accident Commission, $100 million's behind. I mean, it cost $30,000 a week, $300,000 a year to keep a patient in hospital. That'd build a house. And we've had people in hospital for 2 years. And the hospital's charging third party. It's crazy. So Paraquad's picked up the baton, and did 3 years in Adelaide at conversion, but and we're now looking at Port Lincoln and Riverland, and a small part that I've done in doing books on speedway and videos have raised 160,000 or something. Michael, was it in that era? We're doing, so I'm producing another one now, and I like to be active.
On that note, we'll leave it. Thank you very much for being active with us.
No, look, thank you. And pleasure. Yeah.